I needed to pay for college. I needed to ensure that I was going to have some stability once I graduated. We were the only combat camera unit in the entire continent of Africa. So there was a ton of opportunity to embed with not just Air Force, but, a lot of the special forces. And a bunch of whale sharks showed up out of nowhere, and I was just swimming with whale sharks. Like, it was just like crazy. Like, everything that I did, I was jumping out of planes with CCTs, like out of C-130s from 14,000 feet. That you never want to be the biggest fish in a small pond, ever. Like, you as soon as you realize that you have maxed out your potential, you really should be looking for the next great things.
All right, welcome to Veterans Corner. I'm George Hinestrosa, an Air Force and Army retired veteran of 25 years and a business owner for 9 years. Here on the show, we explore how military experience transforms into business success. Each episode features veterans who've built thriving businesses, sharing strategies that turn military training into entrepreneurial advantage. The mission is to inspire and equip transitioning service members with practical knowledge and real-world insights from veterans who've built their businesses in many different industries. And today's guest is Allie Delury. Welcome to Veterans Corner, Allie.
Nice to meet you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Allie. You know that moment in a film where everything clicks? When the story, the visuals, the emotion, all of it comes together and you realize you're watching something real. My guest today has spent her career chasing that moment. But here's the twist. She's done it in war zones, on evacuation flights out of Afghanistan, at the world's largest air shows, in the mountains of France filming winemakers, and on the streets of Brooklyn producing everything from commercial spots to Academy Award qualified films. She's photographed newborns in Colorado hospitals and documented special operations forces in the Baltic states. She's grown social media accounts from 0 to millions of views while sailing around the world. And she's briefed 3-star generals before sending them in front of international press. She was the first person on the ground in Haiti after the devastating hurricane. She's tripled Facebook engagement for a major news network, and she's built a veteran-owned production company from scratch while still serving as a public affairs officer in the Air Force Reserve. But here's what fascinates me the most. At every turn in her career, she's chosen the harder path, the embedded assignment, the startup with no budget, the 48-hour film challenge with 33 women, the 6-week shoot in a foreign country with an international crew she'd never met. Again, please welcome producer, director, and storyteller, Allie Delury.
Wow, that was quite the intro. You're right. You're very good at this. I've never heard anyone introduce me that way before.
Well, it's the truth, and the truth is wonderful. So, Allie, before we get started and dig a little bit into maybe your some of your emotional somersaults and your mental gymnastics going through your life and doing all these things, just share with the audience a little bit about what even made you want to join the military in the first place. And I know you already had a career before the military, but just let's focus a little bit for the audience. What is it that brought you into the military space?
Well, my motivation is definitely not glamorous. I am the first person in my entire family to ever join the military, so it's not like I had someone to look up to and footsteps that I felt like I needed to fill. In fact, it was quite the opposite. I did it out of desperation, which I think is a much more realistic view of why people join the military in 2025. I joined in 2008, which was the financial crisis, and I already was working toward a career in news and film, and I thought there's no way that those industries are going to survive what's happening in the world right now. So I hit up a recruiter. I thought actually I was going to go Army at first, but then the Army recruiter told me to go Air Force. He's like, if I could do it all over again, I would do Air Force. So I did, and I ended up getting a small scholarship to the University of Minnesota ROTC program, and I commissioned as a second lieutenant from there. But yeah, I mean, for me, it was much more. I
Right,
needed to pay for college. I needed
right,
to ensure that I was going to have some stability
right,
once I graduated. And a lot of people in my position as 18, 19-year olds at that time were not. They were not sure that that was going to be their reality. So I made it mine.
So that
And
was your age? You were about 18, 19 time frame?
yeah, I was 18 when 2008 hit. And so,
Right.
first year in college, it just graduated high school. It was a very
Hmm.
scary time. And, I have a lot of empathy for a lot of college kids that went through something similar with COVID. There's nothing scarier than having all of these skills, but nowhere to apply it and no trust
Right.
from any company that you're going to do a good job. So, you have to
Hmm.
play the waiting game. And it's just, it's a huge bummer. And so the military was my way to fast track all of that and to
Right,
maybe
right.
build my skills in a military capacity, with the understanding that, as soon as I stopped having fun, I would get out and then I could apply those skills in the civilian world.
So since we're going down that path, Ali, and you're on a roll here, so let's let's dig a little bit into that. So you joined, let's say, out of need, want, desperation, situational, whatever was going on in your life at that time, and many of us also did it that way. Um, when you went in and you actually went into the Air Force, and I was prior Air Force before I went Army too, so for 8 years. What exactly, like, did you pick your job? Did you want to go combat camera or whatever, how did you, what did the recruiter say, okay, we're going to put you in this and you took it, or you wanted to do that?
Well, when I saw Air Force, I did what everyone else does, and I just assume that everyone there flies planes. And so initially, I did
You
want
watched Top
to
Gun like
be.
I did.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, I watched the movies. I knew the three jobs that you could have in the Air Force, and I knew pilot was one of them. So I just assumed that that was going to be my job. So that's actually what I started doing. I started taking those lessons on the Cessnas and, doing the Civil Air Patrol thing.
Mhm.
But I had terrible vision. So almost immediately they were like, you do not qualify for this. Pick something else. So I just, I did a little bit of research and I was a television reporter at the time. I was, working to try to fund my way through college, and I was working as a sports reporter with the Big Ten Network and Fox Sports
Mhm.
North. So that was kind of my track. I thought I was going to be the next Aaron Andrews, and I was like, well, there's no sports reporters in the military, but there's PR, which I guess is kind of the same. So I put in for public affairs, and they gave it to me. They're like, well, you already have all this life experience that checks all these boxes, so this will be an easy transition for you. And then once I was public affairs for 2 years in the military, that's when my leadership said, hey, you are also checking a lot of boxes for this more elite group in the public affairs career field called combat camera.
Right,
Would you consider doing that? And that, to me, was the most fun I ever had in the military, was doing combat camera.
right. So go ahead, take us a little bit through that then. Let's take us a little bit through your experience, combat camera. So what was one of your first like assignments that you might that what stands out to you during the camera phase of your life? Obviously you had done stuff before the military in this field, but now you're actually doing it combat. I mean combat camera, right? So what stands out? What challenges do you remember having to go through?
I think for me, what comes to mind when I think of combat camera is where I deployed as a combat
Mhm.
camera officer. And I think that's a lot of people's experience is when you're in garrison and you're training, it is quite boring. I was stationed at Lackland Air Force Base. We were right next to the dog training facility, so I feel like all of our training
Yeah,
shoots were just like shooting the dogs, and
yeah,
you're
yeah.
just always itching for that opportunity to
Right.
actually apply what you learned in a combat environment. So when I deployed, I went to Djibouti, Africa. I was 24 years old. I was in
Wow.
incredible shape, and I was able to do a lot of the missions that maybe
Mhm.
some of my guys were too tired to do. We were the only combat camera unit in the entire continent of Africa. So there was a ton of opportunity
Wow.
to embed with not just Air Force, but a lot of the special forces that were on the ground, like MARSOC, the SEALs, like all of these different entities and organizations. I got to do a lot of the missions with like EOD and CIS, a lot of more like the high level stuff that was classified that I thought was very, very fun. And then, my team, they were able to do like even more fun stuff, like going to Uganda and tagging along with some of the teams there or doing humanitarian relief stuff. I think a lot of my best content came from that assignment because it was just me. I was a lieutenant
Right,
at the time, if you can believe
right,
it.
right.
I was the youngest ranking, I guess, like,
Yeah,
department head, if you would call it,
right,
who was managing a team of four.
right,
And I just got to do whatever I wanted to do. There was no one
right,
looming over me.
right,
Leadership trusted me, and,
right.
I would give
Yeah,
my briefs, and I just felt very empowered. I felt very
right,
confident in my craft. And like I said, I was in great shape, so I was able to keep up with the physical
right.
demands of the job. And I remember I did a mission with EOD that required me to dive, and I already had my dive cert just from
Wow.
my personal experience, and so I got to go out with them, and we
Yeah,
were doing this whole mission, and a bunch of whale sharks showed up out of nowhere, and I was just swimming with whale sharks. Like, it was just like crazy, like everything that I
wow.
did. I was jumping out of planes with CCTs, like out of C-130s from 14,000 feet, and landing in the Grand Bar Desert, which is like one of the largest deserts where they do like some of the NASA recovery stuff from. And it was incredible. Like, I had so much fun. So for me, like, I also have to caveat my experience when I say combat camera.
R-
I wasn't
Right,
getting shot at. I wasn't, I
right,
was
right.
doing things in like a combat zone,
Environment,
but
environment, right.
yeah. So at any moment, of course, like something could have
Right, right.
happened, and
I mean, those are dangerous, and regardless, right? Whether things can blow up in a second in areas like that.
exactly. And I
Yeah, I
still had all
managed.
the training that
Right.
all my guys had, which was fun too. Because I think as an
So were
officer,
you Halo qualified or did you jump tandem?
I jumped tandem. There's no way. There's no way I would trust myself jumping out alone with my camera and all my
Yeah,
gear.
yeah,
But tandem was still great. Like,
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
still, I
Absolutely.
had
What an
GoPros
experience.
everywhere, and yeah, it was a blast. Yeah, I had
Yeah.
so much
I
fun.
asked because I was a paratrooper in the Army. Part of, because I was stationed at Fort Bragg, and just because you're stationed at Fort Bragg, you've got to be a paratrooper just to be here, pretty much. So
That's
I
cool.
understand that jumping out of plane things. I did it almost 100 times. So,
That's very cool. I'm
um,
jealous of that. They seem to have a really good time doing
yeah,
it
yeah.
day in
Well,
and day out.
after jump school, it becomes quite an adrenaline rush, and after a while, you look forward to it. Right at the beginning, it's a little bit scary, especially jumping at night when it's like 10 o'clock at night, and you got the moonlight, and you're jumping into darkness pretty much, right? And you can't see the ground till it's coming up on you. So, but yeah, it's that those things are so interesting. So now you are there, and obviously you were in shape, and to be around those alpha males out there with all those special forces guys. Did you ever run across any PSYOP guys or civil affairs or?
Absolutely. Yeah, that was one of I, I would call them clients in the civilian world, but that was like one of our big
Right,
partnerships was to work a
right.
lot with CA and
And PSYOP.
do a lot of yes, exactly.
Yeah,
And that's an interesting thing too. That they say that public affairs really can't touch IO or PSYOP, which is true. Like, you really can't use any of that on American people. But combat
right,
camera was like the parlay into that world where
right,
you were
right.
basically reporting to the J39, the information
Hmm.
operations
Hmm.
commander, and all of your products were
Right,
being used in that capacity. So that was
right.
really cool to see both sides of like the
Right, and
same
that's why I
coin.
asked. That's why I asked because I know it's all interrelated. Because I was PSYOP, and so we always, CA, PSYOP, the combat camera crews and public affairs. I mean, that all that thing is just one big, information operations. Pretty much, you said it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, great. So going on from there, so tell us a little bit about your progression from that great experience that remains with you, I'm sure, and how did you carry that on? What lessons learned from that as you transition out of the military? You know, when did you start thinking, well, it's time for me to move on? Or, at what point did that start to kick in?
I think when I got back from deployment, I had 1 year left on my contract as combat camera, and that would have put me at 5 years, which is around the transition point for a lot of officers, 4 or 5
Right,
years.
right.
And, I remember someone told me, maybe in the newsroom, like years before, that you never want to be the biggest fish in a small pond, ever. Like,
Right.
as soon as you realize that you have maxed out your potential, you really should be looking for the next great thing. So I kind of felt that way. After combat camera, I was like, well, I already did what I
Mhm.
assessed to be the coolest job in the PA career field. And really,
Yeah.
from here on out, I'm just going to be sitting behind a desk as a field grade officer and watching other people do cool stuff. So I'm not ready for that transition, if you will.
Too
I
young
want to,
still.
exactly, I want to keep doing cool stuff. I want to
Yeah.
keep making content. And the cool thing about my unit, it no longer exists. It was the third combat camera unit out in a joint base, San Antonio, Texas, and they were also transitioning to be a full-scale production company for the Air Force. They were also an audiovisual squadron, an AVS, if you will. So when I wasn't in a combat camera capacity, I got to basically run a giant production company with like really fancy like red cameras and producers who were civilians who had been in the industry for a while. So when I came back, I was already exposed to a lot of that, and I was learning what they were doing, and I was learning how to tell stories in a much more controlled space. And so for me, I think it made that transition much easier because I was kind of already doing it before I left. And so for me, it was just a question of, do I want to be doing this full time? And the answer was, yeah, I do. This is so fun. I love telling stories, whether it is in a combat camera capacity or something that's much more polished. I think for me, that was something that always remained my passion.
Mhm. So let's transition a little bit into physical fitness because I know from the first time we spoke, and you mentioned, Ironman and marathons and triathlons, and talk to us a little bit about your experience and why the physical, because you look, and it's just, and I'm looking at you and you look like a woman, right? You don't look tough and like, you look like a woman, right? And the way you should look. Um, but you do these things, right? You do these, you put yourself through these rigorous trials, and I'm going to call them trials because it's what it is. It's a trial, right? It's more of a personal challenge than it is a let me win. If I can just get through this and finish, that's an accomplishment.
Mhm.
Tell us a little bit about what brought you into that space. Obviously, the Air Force is not known for its great physical fitness, prowess in its airmen, right? But even though it has its standards, but you took it to a level that is not normal, right, for most people. Tell us a little bit about your experience with physical fitness throughout your military and going forward till now, actually.
Well, it's a very funny story because when I was in high school, I did track for like 3 days and quit because I was like, this is hard. I was never the kind of person who worked out. I had never done a
Mhm.
push-up before joining the military. And I remember when I was in ROTC, they have you do the PT test every year, just like active duty.
Sure.
And because I had no one in my family who had done this before, I did feel like
Hmm.
I was very much on my own in the research side of this. I'd completely misread the page that showed the physical fitness standards. I thought that the 100% like maxing out was the
Right.
minimum. So I was like, I need to work out so
Wow.
much. Like this is intense. Like I have to run a mile and a half in like
Right.
7 minutes. Like I
Right.
was just like, oh my gosh, this
Right.
is crazy. So I trained to that standard. I trained to the max very naturally because I just thought that that was the minimum
Right.
standard. And so obviously when I did my test, everyone was like, oh my gosh, you did really good. And I was like, no, I barely passed. And they're like, no,
You
you
maxed.
maxed it. And
Yeah.
so I was able to, just by like completely shifting my mindset by accident, get the max every single year after that. So to this, I mean, I'm still a reservist, a major in the reserves, and I
Right. Right. Right.
still, even after 2 kids, max out the PT test because in my mind I'm like, oh, that's just the
Yeah.
way it is. That's
Right. Right.
that's
Right.
in my mind. So that was
Wonderful.
my experience with fitness. And so
Right.
I have kind of a similar ignorance on a lot of the challenges that I do. The Ironman that I did when I was 27 in Cozumel, I had signed up for it not really truly understanding what an Ironman was.
Right.
I did it more because I felt like people thought I couldn't do it. And so when I signed up and I was getting all the emails, I was like, oh, there's a swim component? I don't know how to swim. I don't know, I haven't ridden a bike since I was 6 years old. So I had to really start from scratch. And because I was starting from scratch, I didn't have these like preconceived negative notions of like, can I even do it? Am I
Mhm.
capable? Am I, setting myself up for failure? None of that existed because I had to start from the bottom,
Right.
just, information wise. So yeah, it was great.
Cozumel, Mexico, right? You're talking about?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Cozumel.
There
And
wasn't
it
anything
was
closer. You had to go to Mexico to do your first one.
I know. I felt like I might as well just make it a vacation if I'm going to
Yeah,
do
yeah.
it, because worst case, if I failed or I didn't
You're
finish,
on
like I
vacation.
was, I was on vacation. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
figured, have it be in like a cool spot. And, I did it with my husband. I joke, we're about to do our second one, but, I did beat him by, 3 hours the first time. And
Mhm.
now he's in much better shape. He's going to beat me my 3 hours this time.
Yeah.
But we have, healthy competition
Yeah.
and we
Yeah.
support each other in that way, which is really, really, really nice.
Yeah.
And yeah, I
What
ended
other
up
cool
qualifying
spots?
for.
What other cool spots have you gone to? That you went.
Um, we do a lot of races. We try to do them in just like not just cool spots, but things that maybe not a lot of
Yeah.
people have done. Like
Yeah.
we one time flew out to the Grand Canyon and did like
Mhm.
our own rim to rim, where you run from the north side to the south side,
Mhm.
in one day, and then we like flew back
Wow.
to New York the day after. We did the world's hardest marathon in Peru, which is running the entire Inca Trail, which takes most people 3 days, doing it in like 12 hours. And yeah, I think a lot of the stuff that we do, like we've been to New Zealand and we've climbed, Mount Doom, that like giant volcano in Lord of
Right.
the Rings. We just kind
Wow.
of did it, not really without training, but just going for it.
Right.
So, we have aspirations to try to do like Kilimanjaro in record time. Like we're going to be
Wow.
doing another Ironman in Wisconsin in September. So luckily, he's so supportive, and it goes both ways. We're supportive of each other in our own physical
Yeah.
goals and endeavors. So it makes it much more fun to do the challenges knowing that you have someone
Right.
beside you
Wow.
literally running it with you and cheering you along.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So you still balance so your military responsibilities with your civilian now. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about how you've managed to stay in both worlds now. Now you've been in there, you're on the outside, you had two careers pretty much. You have two careers going on right now still. How are you managing that, and how do you feel about still being serving your country? And thank you for your
Um,
service, by the way.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I'm not gonna lie. It does get harder with time.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, I was working in New York City this last go around, and my unit unexpectedly closed. And so now I'm kind of in that transition world again, where I
Hmm.
have to decide like, do I want
Right.
to look for another unit and continue serving as a reservist, or do I want to pivot full time as a producer director? It's really tough because I think there is a small part of me that still has
Hmm.
a sense of identity in the military, but I think I do, especially now, get further and further away from that identity. And,
Right.
having a family also puts a different label on that. And you kind of start to
Hmm.
realize, especially with young
Hmm.
kids, what is
Right.
still worth doing with this
Right.
family.
And when time wise, right? You have the time seems to get more and more limited the older you get for some reason, right? Maybe it's because we just take on more and more responsibility and so we just kind of block out our times during the day.
Yeah,
But
and I
yeah.
think I think for me too, the way that I've had to reframe my mind in the last few years, really since COVID, is that I think we have all been conditioned as humans to kind of sign up for a job or a career with the
Hmm.
intent on doing as much time in that career as possible,
Right.
in exchange for maybe like a pension, in exchange for maybe like healthcare, all these things that were dangled in
Hmm.
front of me as an 18-year-old that I valued, like the education, the healthcare.
Right.
For me now, I do feel like that. is a little bit of a trap. And part of what now fuels my entrepreneurial spirit is that
Hmm.
you could make your future without tethering it to an entity or an organization or a company or the military, or you can do all of that on your terms. And
Hmm.
talking about kids now, I've had two kids in a very short amount of time, so I've had to really fast track that and get
Right.
to a point mentally where I'm like, okay, like, I am
Hmm.
now only going to, time's limited, my energy is limited, I'm now only going to invest it in the things
Hmm.
that give back to me and my family in these
Hmm.
ways. And for
Right.
me, the military is becoming further away from that, and
Right.
I'm having now the confidence that I had as a
Hmm.
young 24-year-old in Djibouti, Africa, to maybe
Right.
pivot and start investing more in the business that I have.
Sure. Sure. Well, so so we've talked about a few things here. We've talked about some of the challenges, your physical abilities. Let's talk a little bit about how you've managed to be so strong, because really, these are not, again, and I'm not saying you're female, anyone, male, female, just you're being put into these situations that are not normal, that require physical prowess, that require mental stability, that require some kind of psychological, emotional content. You know, let's talk a little bit about the psychological gymnastics that you've had to do. Just a little bit. Just how have you coped, right? Because, when I look at everything you're saying and I'm listening to you and you're smiling and you're talking about these are things that are difficult, right? You make it sound easy. You make it sound like it was just a walk in the park, and I know it wasn't. But you have some kind of psychological, emotional content, strong will within you. Share a little bit about how your inner dialogue is, and how you cope with your daily life. I mean, how do you make time for these things? Because we're keeping in mind here transitioning veterans, right? We want to help transitioning veterans. We want to help people that are maybe have transitioned, retired, or whatever, or are in the process of. What are all these things going through your mind? Because we all have mental gymnastics that we have to deal with. How do you deal with yours? And what has been your North Star, to keep you focused?
I guess if I address your last part first, what is my
Right.
North
Sure, sure.
Star?
Anyway, yeah, there was a lot in there. Sorry.
No, it's all good. I mean, for me, I here's the advice that I give, because I love hiring veterans on set. I love working with organizations like Veterans in Media Entertainment to expose veterans to the film industry, which is like a very, very brutal and rigorous industry. Like it does have similarities to the military in that sense, but even more so, I would say. It is like a very difficult industry to establish yourself in if you've already had a career. Like they favor people who have started working as a grip at like 16 years old, much like the military sometimes. So I think for me, it was easy for me to get out because I knew what the other side looked like. I had the career before the military, then I did the military. So I always knew that it is like really great on the other side. But I think people struggle a lot with trusting that, for one, but also exploring their own identity in conjunction with their military service. So sometimes the advice that I give veterans when they're out and they're looking for a job is, they'll come at recruiters with, this is what I did in the military, this is what I was, this is what I accomplished, which is all in the past. And in the same way that when I joined the military, the only identity that I ever knew was that I was a television reporter. And I said, this is what I used to do in news. This is, what my coverage of Hurricane Sandy looked like. And they were like, we don't care. Like, we just want to know if you can do like 50 push-ups in a minute and go lead a bunch of airmen. Like they didn't care about that. And I was
Right.
wrapping so much of my identity into something that wasn't applicable in this new career that I was trying to try to be a part of. So when you're looking at what is on the other side and what is next in your life as a veteran, really like meditate and explore what it is that makes you happy and what it is that you want to do next. And it doesn't
Mhm.
have to be like in conjunction
Right,
with what you did in the military. You don't have to
right,
apply that. You just have to commit yourself to saying, this was a part of me. This is still a part of me, but I want to do this now. Like people who know me best, they don't know me as like Allie, the combat camera officer. They know me as Allie, the producer. And when they get to know me, they find out later that I was also in the military and that I also
right,
did combat camera and all this other stuff.
right.
I think that is the way to approach it. If you're on the fence and you're transitioning, is, search your soul for like, ask yourself, what is the thing that would make me so happy to do for the rest of my life? Because now you have the freedom to do it. You're not
Mhm.
tied to the rigors and the discipline
Right,
and
right.
all of the red tape of the military.
Mhm.
You can go start your own business. You could,
Yeah,
like,
right,
yeah, maybe you were like an EOD guy before and now you want to be a barista. Who cares? You can do
right,
that.
right, right.
I've written stories about people who have, and it is a very scary thing.
Yeah.
And I would say like trust that you have an identity outside of the military because that's what
Mhm.
99% of the world is. It's people who haven't served, who have
Mhm.
learned that and figured that out. And,
Right.
if they can do it, you can do it too. You're
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
1%.
Yeah, I'm glad you framed everything that way because I notice also that, well, I notice everyone has this. Everyone is born with a natural talent. I believe that, right? Maybe some people have several talents, and I think everyone has that inherent, right, talent thing. When you're a young kid and you've got all these dreams and you're growing up and you've got all this stuff, I want to do this, I want to do that. But then we get thrown into the box, right? They always say think outside the box, but we're always thrown into the box from a young age. School puts us in the box, college puts us in the box, we go into the military, we have our job, you know. And so a lot of times, our talent is subdued, and we have to become or play a role, right? Play a role and do it, and sometimes that makes the other opaque and it hides the talent. And what you're saying, right? You have a talent, you have aspirations, you had them since you were a child, you had dreams. Don't let those go, right? Don't let those go. Keep those there. And now that you're out of the military should be a foundation. It should be a foundational thing. I did this. I'm part of the crew that did this, right? I'm part of the group of people that, but don't let that limit you into what you're going to do next, right? Which is basically what you just said, right? But I'm just trying to bring it out more because really I think a lot of us are trapped. Like doing this podcast, right? I never grew up when I was a kid. I'm going to start a podcast, 5 months ago or whatever. It's like, I'm going to do it because I want to give back to the community, but it's not necessarily who George is. I would have rather been a professional athlete or a musician or something. That was really, and I still do that. I still play soccer. I still play the guitar. I do those things for my own personal happiness, right? And I've had to teach myself those things. But yeah, going back to that, it's so important. We need to really let people know that they have a life outside of what they've done in the past, right? Don't think that you have to be drawn into that same line of get out of the rails, jump off the rails and go do, you know, like Ozzy Osbourne says, going off the rails on a crazy train. Just do your craziness, whatever it is that you want to do, right? So, yeah, thank you. That's so important, and I really would like to focus on things like that. So, Ali, do you find time to meditate? Do you have quiet times? I mean, because we all have to like kind of recharge, right? Other than
Hmm.
sleeping. How do you bring yourself into focus? How do you bring yourself into, wow, that was a busy day and I've got this to do tomorrow? Where's do you meditate? Do you have a spiritual side of you? And, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of meditation. And I will admit, I did it a lot more before I was pregnant and while I was pregnant with my first. But I
Hmm.
have had to also refine my identity as a mother. In the last
Hmm.
2 years, I've had two
Hmm.
kids back to back, very close in age. And so it really just feels like I've been pregnant for 2 years straight. And the things that I thought that I had time to do, I have kind of lost sight of. And I think for me now, my heart is no longer inside my body. It exists across the room over there in those two little boys that I see playing. And I so much of my being now exists to make sure that they have the best life possible. So my priorities have changed where, you know, basically, long story short, I need to start meditating again because I believe it is like the best thing. That therapy, exercising, like all of the pillars that they kind of talk about in the military still exist and don't go away. Like you still need to exercise all of these things. For me, I did a lot of meditation on Wim Hof. I couldn't do Wim Hof when I was pregnant because it's a lot of like holding your breath.
Right.
But I think with those two things combined, it is like, I mean, you just feel different. You feel different,
Hmm.
and you
Right.
learn about the power of equanimity, and
Hmm.
you learn to be like more stoic as a person. And
Hmm.
I have to get back there. And this is a great reminder to,
Yeah.
it's only
Yeah.
10 minutes a day. Like how you can
Yeah. Yeah.
set aside 10 minutes a
Hmm.
day. Like I
Yeah. Yeah.
sometimes trick myself into thinking like, I have
Yeah.
two businesses and two kids and all this stuff. And, I'm like,
Right.
oh, I don't have time. I
Right.
do. I
And
need
people
to
and
make
people
time.
I think people don't understand what meditation really is, and a lot of people have different I think misconceptions of meditation. Meditation is, to me, and what I've kind of figured it out, right? Like in the Bible it says that, Jesus went off and went into the mountains and stayed up there the whole night away from the disciples, right? Praying, whatever it was that he was doing. He was getting away from the hustle and the bustle and the responsibility to clear himself, to reconnect with the Father, whatever it is, right? However people want to do it. I don't, everyone has a different view on religion and how things should be done, but it's just an example. Meditation to me has become a disconnecting from, right? It's not so much chanting mantras or repeating, what do you call these things, affirmations, and sitting there and reading your affirmation. That can help if you are really totally unfocused. But really, a meditation should be something that quiets your mind, allows you to breathe, and just disconnects you and allows your mind to just have that moment. Here I am, I'm alive, I'm breathing, and this is all I am right now. Everything else is psychological psychobabble, right? But meditation is something that is quieting yourself in a way where you can say, okay, boom, I'm filling up my gas tank. It's like filling up the gas tank. You're emotional, right?
Right.
And
It's a great way too to train yourself. When you close your eyes and you think about nothing or you try to think about
nothing, right?
nothing, it's like almost impossible, right? Like your mind immediately goes
Hmm.
somewhere. It either goes to the past, or it goes to the future. And
Hmm.
it's interesting to sit back and evaluate from a distance, like where your mind goes and why. Because if I'm
Hmm.
going to a memory from the past, like I'm suffering with regret in some way. If I go to
Right.
something in the future, then I have anxiety about a thing. Like it
Anxiety.
helps kind of really bring to light some of the things that you kind of learn about yourself, and
Hmm.
it makes it easier to treat those things if you find yourself
Hmm.
constantly going back to a certain thing. And that's why I think,
Right.
therapy is a great thing to do in conjunction with meditation because you have a professional, someone from a distance, who is
Right.
also helping you evaluate those things and saying this is a way to cope with those things. And so
Right.
you actually learn how your brain
Hmm.
works instead of just
Right.
reacting to how it works. And
Right.
I think like
Right.
that proactive approach is how you develop like very healthy and, competent and successful
Right.
individuals.
Yeah, being cognitively congruent, right? Or what they say, thinking about what you're thinking about, right? So it's not just thoughts coming through your mind. It's like asking yourself, for instance, okay, I just had that thought. Where did that come from? And is it really important for me to be thinking about that? And
Hmm.
something that I read also, they say that a lot of our mental energy is lost. And because of we regurgitate, like from yesterday, people tend to regurgitate almost 80% of their thoughts from yesterday. They regurgitate them again, their anxieties. And it's like a vicious cycle of regurgitating things that are half those, well, they say most of those things ever never come to pass, right? It's just things that your mind fabricates. So by doing that, what you just mentioned is closing out yourself, kind of stops that. And it's not, yeah, the thoughts come through your mind, and they say, it's like sitting on the beach and watching ships in the distance just going across, right? They're just kind of like sailboats. Thoughts should be like that. Don't give them any importance, right? The only thing that you should give importance to is what you have to do. You know, okay, this is what I have to do. I'm going to go do that. Okay, think about that, right? But don't think about all these peripheral things, because they tend to rob you of your energy, of your psychological energy that you need to create good thoughts,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
That's a really
So,
good point. Yeah, that's I mean, they talk about being able to separate yourself from those thoughts, and be able to, like, you look
hmm
at your thoughts as like clouds passing overhead almost,
hmm
like like that separation, I
right,
think, like, helps with, like, that depletion of energy, or that,
right,
mismanagement of your brain's energy, and like thoughts that
sure,
don't matter, or are
sure.
like, holding you down or whatever.
hmm
I think a lot of that awareness from within
hmm
is like so crucial for that.
right,
And you're right.
right.
Like, I'm a very, like, I'm big on, collective consciousness and like
hmm
energy and like all of this
right,
stuff that kind of just we as humans can't delineate, because we exist in a 3D space, and time is
right,
like a flat line for us, when, really it's a flat circle, or whatever,
right.
interstellar analogy you want
Yeah,
to
yeah,
use.
yeah.
But yeah, it's just, it
hmm
is interesting, and there's so much
hmm
that we don't know or
right.
understand about the
and
brain,
and
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 it's crazy.
taking it that to that next level is that if the thoughts and the energy going through is negative or anxious, the end result is a physical manifestation of disease, right? And that's eventually all that tension, all that stress, all that negativity actually transforms your into a chemical imbalance in the body, which transforms into eventually a manifestation physically of some kind of disease, right? And that's unfortunate, right? Because people don't understand the connection of, they think that the mind and the body are two different things, or, the brain is just an organ. No, it's not. The mind is something spiritual, and there is energy involved in that,
I agree.
which we don't need to get into. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get off on all this. But, it's
I
important to
love
talk
that.
about these things, right? Yeah, I can talk about this stuff all day long, because that's all I've done for the past 20 years is try to get myself right. So, Ali, this has been wonderful. Is there anything else? So we were right at the 42-minute mark here, and so I just, if you had a couple of minutes as an officer or as just a professional, to get in front of a group of people that are transitioning, what is it that you would want to share with them from the heart? I mean, just, no dictation, right? No, hey, you have to do this. It's just like, take this into consideration when you're doing whatever. I mean, what would you share with a group of people?
Yeah, I would tell everyone to just trust themselves. Like, really, that's
Hmm
ultimately what it comes down to. In the military,
hmm
we are told, just, you break yourself down as an individual so you can build
hmm
yourself up as a team. It's like very team oriented. The trust that you have is
Right.
put on other people. It's put on the organization. It's put on your
hmm
leadership. There are not many opportunities in the military, in my opinion, to trust yourself. Like, so
hmm
much of it is shared. So when you
Right.
leave that community and you leave that network, it feels very isolating. It feels you
hmm
feel very exposed as a
Right.
person,
Right.
because for a lot of people, it's kind of the first time that they have to walk alone
Right.
in either an idea or a career path or what have you. So, for me, like I said, it was easy, because I knew that I was going to have to, similar to when I was a reporter going into the military, trust
hmm
myself, trust my
Right.
ability to assimilate in a culture that maybe I'm not familiar with, or maybe I don't have as much
Right.
experience in.
hmm
And, I think really that is what it comes down to. Like, you got this. Like, you
Right.
got
Right.
this. Like,
No
and you
doubt.
have to keep telling yourself that, keep believing that, because to your
hmm
point, manifestation therapy is like real, and it helps
hmm
give you the confidence that you need to be successful there.
Right.
Yeah, like, I mean, for me, I am working on a feature-length documentary that has been a passion project of mine for a long time. I shot it 2 years ago, had two kids. I recently started getting back after it, and it's a scary thing to,
Yeah.
open all of the old scripts and look through
Right.
old footage and try
Right.
to bring something to life that has only ever
Right.
existed in my
Right.
mind the last 2 years. But there really is no time like the present, and
Hmm.
I'm so excited to take this thing that is an idea and
Hmm.
make it something that other people can enjoy and consume. And to me, I think that
Hmm.
that can apply to any career,
Right.
is
Right.
going from the idea to the physical manifestation of that thing is so
Sure.
important.
Sure.
And I'm a huge proponent of that.
Yeah, yeah. And just to caveat on what you said earlier, right? Some people are stuck in the past or they're stuck in the future with their thoughts. If they would just realize that the only time that matters is right now. What we're doing right now is the only thing that matters. I have no control over the past. I have no control over the future. None whatsoever, other than the fact that what I do today, now with you, will set me up for the future or will start to align things for the future, but not necessarily. I can't change the future just by thinking about it. I have to actually employ that now in the present. And the present is all we have, right? We can't
Exactly.
guarantee that we'll be alive in an hour, right?
Yeah. I mean, hopefully we will be, because
Well,
I'd love
right.
to
But
watch
what I'm
this
saying is,
podcast.
right, in general, right, we can't,
Yeah.
the now is the only thing we have. Yeah. So, Ali, thank you so much for being such a wonderful guest. I just enjoyed having you, and I enjoy having all the guests. And as we wrap up here, so this wraps up today's episode on Veterans Corner. A huge thank you to Ali for sharing her journey. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Join the conversation by sharing your thoughts or experiences in the comments. Until next time, keep pushing forward, stay strong, and remember, you're never alone. Thanks again, Ali. God bless you. And, thanks for being such an important part of this show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.